SITREP World Briefing for June 4, 2026. Israel and Lebanon said they had agreed to implement a conditional ceasefire after U.S.-led talks, tying the arrangement to an end to attacks by Hezbollah. The understanding was presented as an effort to stabilize Lebanon after weeks of intensified Israeli military action, and the U.S. said both sides rejected any attempt by any state or non-state actor to hold Lebanon's future hostage. The announcement marked a significant diplomatic step because Israel has recently escalated its campaign and mounted its deepest ground offensive into Lebanon in 2 decades. The ceasefire announcement did not immediately stop military activity. Israel struck South Lebanon on Thursday, hours after the truce was announced, and also threatened new attacks on Beirut. That immediate contradiction between diplomacy and battlefield action highlighted the central problem facing mediators. Any ceasefire in Lebanon is only as durable as the willingness of Israel, Hezbollah, and their backers to translate a political formula into restraint on the ground. For Lebanon, the stakes go beyond a pause in cross-border fire. The country's political system and economy have been battered for years, and a major expansion of fighting with Israel would deepen pressure on state institutions in Beirut and on civilians across the south. For Israel, the talks are tied to its demand that Hezbollah end attacks from Lebanese territory. The conditional structure of the deal therefore leaves enforcement questions unresolved, and the renewed Israeli strikes after the announcement suggested that any reduction in violence will depend on rapid, verifiable changes in the military posture of both sides. The U.S. House of Representatives approved a war powers resolution aimed at limiting President Donald Trump's military actions against Iran in a 215-208 vote. 4 Republicans joined Democrats to pass the measure. Lawmakers backing the resolution framed it as an effort to reassert Congress's authority over decisions that could pull the United States deeper into war with Iran. The measure is largely symbolic, but the vote still carries weight because it publicly records bipartisan unease over the president's use of force. Under the War Powers framework, Congress has long sought to preserve its constitutional role in authorizing prolonged hostilities, while presidents of both parties have argued that they retain broad commander-in-chief powers in fast-moving crises. The House vote turned that long-standing institutional dispute into a live test of support for Trump's Iran strategy. The timing reflects the broader escalation between Washington and Tehran, which has raised fears of a wider regional war involving U.S. forces, Iranian assets, and regional partners. A 215-208 House vote can shape the next phase of debate by increasing pressure on the Senate, forcing administration officials to defend operational decisions, and signaling to allies and adversaries alike that Trump does not have unlimited political backing on Iran. The resolution functions as both a constitutional statement and a warning against further unilateral military escalation. Iran launched a drone strike on Kuwait International Airport in Kuwait City, Kuwait, killing 1 person and injuring more than 60 others, according to footage and reporting published on Wednesday and Thursday. The attack brought one of the Gulf's most important civilian transport hubs directly into the regional conflict. The attack pushed the confrontation beyond military sites and into a major commercial gateway used by travelers, cargo operators, and state aviation authorities. The casualty toll, with 1 dead and more than 60 injured, highlights the vulnerability of civilian infrastructure as regional hostilities widen. Kuwait International Airport is the country's main air hub and a symbol of Kuwait's role as a relatively stable Gulf state positioned between larger powers including Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. A strike there carries consequences beyond immediate damage because it threatens aviation safety, commercial confidence, and the perception that Gulf transport networks can remain insulated from military escalation. The visual evidence from Kuwait City gives the attack broader strategic significance. In conflicts across the Middle East, drone strikes are often used to signal reach, precision, and willingness to raise costs without immediately crossing into a full conventional war. By hitting an international airport and causing more than 60 injuries, Iran demonstrated that regional escalation can disrupt civilian life far from front lines. while forcing neighboring governments and airlines to reassess air security, emergency planning, and the risk of further attacks on non-military targets. UN member states elected Kyrgyzstan to a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in New York, giving the Central Asian state its first place on the body for the 2027 to 2028 term. Security Council seats are limited, regionally allocated, and closely watched as measures of international support. For Kyrgyzstan, the election gives it a higher profile role in debates on war, sanctions, peacekeeping, and international security. Germany failed to secure the seat, with Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul attributing the outcome to Russia's influence over sentiment against Berlin due to its backing for Ukraine. Germany has long presented itself as a major UN contributor and a candidate with diplomatic reach, financial support for multilateral institutions, and a record on international mediation. The contest carried significance beyond a single vote in New York, highlighting how the war in Ukraine is shaping alignments inside the UN. Kyrgyzstan's victory stood out because Central Asia has rarely held such visibility inside the Security Council, even though the region sits between Russia, China, Afghanistan, and key energy and transport corridors. A 2-year term will not give Bishkek veto power, which remains with the 5 permanent members, but it will allow Kyrgyz diplomats to shape negotiations, chair meetings, and speak with more authority on security questions. Germany's defeat is likely to prompt debate in Berlin about how effectively it can convert its economic weight and support for Ukraine into support among a broader UN membership. SpaceX said it had set terms for an initial public offering in the United States that would raise about $75 billion and value Elon Musk's rocket and satellite company at roughly $1.75 trillion. The move positions the offering to become the largest stock market debut on record, and it gives public investors a first chance to buy into a business that has become central to the U.S. commercial space sector through its Falcon launches, Starlink satellite network, and work with NASA and the Pentagon. The company indicated a target share price for buyers earlier than many investors had expected, signaling that the listing process is moving quickly and that demand is likely to be tested at an unusually high valuation. A market capitalization near $1.75 trillion would put SpaceX among the most valuable companies in the United States, a position for a business whose core operations span orbital launches, spacecraft development, and broadband services. The scale of the proposed offering shows how much SpaceX has grown from a private launch company into a part of U.S. space infrastructure. Its reusable rocket program has reshaped launch economics, and Starlink has given the group a second major revenue stream with global strategic importance. That combination helps explain why investors are willing to consider a listing measured in tens of billions of dollars and why the transaction is being watched across the aerospace, telecom, and defense industries. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.